Good evening, and welcome to the 18th edition of the Political Mike podcast. I'm so happy and fortunate to have with me back on Dr. Oliver Davis and Mr. Trequez Mccall, both of whom are candidates for local election. Dr. Oliver Davis for in the state of Indiana and Mr. Trequez Mccall for the great state of South Carolina. We have other guests that will be joining momentarily. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce the guests that are on right now. And as the other guests come, I'll introduce them a little bit later. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Oliver Davis. Dr. Davis served 12 years, 3 consecutive terms on the South Bend Common City Council after first being elected in 2007. Councilman Dr. Oliver Davis worked hard to represent the people of South Bend, Indiana, and to speak out on the issues which help to empower the lives of the people of South Bend. On November 22nd, 2019, Dr. Davis endorsed Vice President Joe Biden for president for the 2020 presidential election and was a spokesperson for the Biden campaign for president. And Davis announced on January 29th of this year, 2020, that he will challenge incumbent Dave Thomas for the St. Joseph County Commissioner District 2 seat in the 2020 primary election. On June 2nd, 2020, Dr. Oliver Davis was blessed to defeat Dave Thomas and won the St. Joseph County Commissioner District 2 Democrat primary. He will now face the Republican challenger in the general election this Tuesday on November 3rd. Dr. Davis has professional roots that are grounded in social work, in which he believes uniquely empowers him in advocating and speaking up for positive change in the lives of individuals, families, groups, and communities. He served as an adjunct professor in the social work and gerontology program at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, and was an adjunct faculty member in the Bachelor's of Arts social program at Brandman University in Irvine, California. Dr. Davis, it's a privilege and honor to have you back, and I'm so looking forward to the wealth of knowledge you're going to share of your experience, not just as someone who is politically engaged, but someone who's actually a candidate themselves for office. So thank you for joining me again.
It's good to be here. It's an honor to be with you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Mr. Trequez Mccall. Trequez T. Mccall is a lifelong resident of Florence, South Carolina, and graduate of Francis Marion University, class of 2015, where he majored in political science. While at Francis Marion, he was awarded the Jesse A. Coleman Political Science Scholarship and the Dr. Neil D. Thigpen Award in South Carolina Politics and Government. While at Francis Marion, he served as the president of the Francis Marion College Democrats and chairman of the PD Young Democrats. He was later appointed by the South Carolina Democratic Party to be the voter protection chair for the PD region in 2014. After graduating from Francis Marion, Trequez obtained his Juris Doctorate degree from North Carolina Central University School of Law. While in law school, he served as a staff editor for the NCCU Law Review and was the chairman of the NCCU Law Democrats. Currently, Trequez is the owner and managing attorney of the Mccall Law Firm located in Florence, South Carolina. And as of June 9th, 2020, he is currently the Democratic nominee for Florence City Council. Mr. Mccall, thank you again for joining us. So excited to have your insight. Looking forward to what you're going to bring to the table as well, sir.
Thank you for having me again, buddy.
Next, we have Miss Tashanika Bryant. Tashanika Bryant was born and raised in Southern California. Graduate of Oakwood University, she has a degree in English literature with a minor in political science. She's also married and the mother of 3. She's the host of Just the Facts, a political podcast. And so, it goes without saying, I'm so happy to have her join us this evening. So next I have Mr. Reginald Hubbard. Reggie has held many senior strategic and logistical roles across a variety of ranging from global marketing, digital and community organizing, government relations, international education, to presidential campaigning. He currently serves as a senior political strategist for a leading progressive advocacy organization, managing their relationships, impact, and communications with Capitol Hill and among the broader progressive movement. In addition to his political work, Reggie is also a 500-hour certified yoga teacher and authored a thesis entitled Yoga and Spiritual Activism, Serving Humanity from a Sense of Devotion and Love. Reggie has taught members of Congress, congressional staff, leading progressive organizations and individuals, sharing techniques for growing peace and ease, as a foundation and not an afterthought. The focus of his teaching practice is to bring more peace and balance to activists and to guide the wellness community toward being more engaged, concerned citizens. Achieving this balance is how we catalyze the transformative change, according to Reggie. And I'm so happy that Reggie, I also want to add that he's also a member of Move On, a very progressive group. Mr. Hubbard, thank you for joining. I'm so happy to have you back. Thank you for making time.
Always, dude. Always. Thanks for calling me.
And City Councilman Devin Keith, thank you for joining. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, sir. Devin Keith was sworn in as a member of the Huntsville, Alabama City Council in November 2016, setting a record as the youngest council member elected to Huntsville's legislative branch of government. In this role, Keith represents District 1, an area that covers much of northern Huntsville, including Alabama A&M University, and stretching into the downtown core. Keith was born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama, and is a proud product of its large community network. Driven by a passion for public service and a deep connection to the people of his community, Keith is a true believer that Huntsville is the best city this side of heaven. Keith is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Alabama A&M and currently serves on the board of directors for the Cap and Gown Project, a Huntsville-based nonprofit organization seeking to provide opportunities and mentorship for underrepresented secondary school students who wish to pursue a college education. Mr. Keith, it's such an honor to have you. I'm so happy to have this dynamic panel.
Man, thank you, King. It's a blessing to be here, young King.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Folks, we are 5 days away. 5 days away from an election that has been described by many as the most important election of our lifetimes. But partly, part of why I'm so excited to have this distinguished panel is because so many of you are involved in local politics. And so I want to start off the conversation by just diving into the importance of municipal elections. Specifically, Mr. Mccall, are there any initiatives in your city, Florence, South Carolina, in which you're running for city council that are on the ballot this year? What's the landscape like in terms of the issues in your region, and how will these issues impact or have a significant impact for the residents of your city, depending on how this election goes on Tuesday?
Yeah, definitely. Well, one of the biggest things that's on the ballot, not on the ballot, I could say on the ballot, in my city is we have a big fight of whether or not something as simple as a Black Lives Matter mural should be allowed to be on the streets of our city. So the city recently allowed it to be down temporary, and then it was pulled up. So now the city is saying that they don't want to, if they do it for one group, they got to do it for all groups. So now you're having people pretty much saying they're asking candidates directly, how do you feel about this issue? And I think this is something that that is going to drive out turnout substantially again with young voters who really do feel that at one point in time when this mural was down, they felt as if, not saying that government was responding to their issues, but that government well, at least hearing them out, so to speak. They was hearing their concerns. And for it to get pulled up before the election, it's very hot and contested right now. So I think it's going to drive out turnout, and that helps out the national race as well. We have in my city race, in my county alone, we have the most candidates running in this county. So it's going to increase turnout throughout this county. It's going to create turnout throughout the state, and it's going to help. We have a guy named Jamie Harrison running for Senate, possibly knock off Lindsey Graham in a major upset. So, so definitely, this is something that that's definitely going to drive out turnout in my city.
Thank you. And Mr. Keith, Huntsville is a very progressive city because you have so many colleges and universities, so many progressive relations to other cities in Alabama. But are there any specific local issues that may be on the ballot this year?
Absolutely. One, let me just say, if everybody gonna say it, and then I'm speaking for everybody. Young King, it's a blessing to be here with you, Mike. I wish I was in your place. I feel old talking to somebody like you, and I got 5 gray hairs. So I want to say, for all the older cats, we are proud of you for the initiatives that you're pushing, for the intelligence that you have, and being aware enough to look for wisdom from Wales. But secondly, man, let me just say, local politics has been a change in the African-American community. It's never really been at the federal level. We've worked our way up. It's trickled up. It was a Selma march. It was fighting a Bull Connor. It was a sit-in at a local level. So local politics has been the supreme change agent for African-Americans across the nation. Brown Bros Board of Education was at a local school district. This was not a Supreme Court issue that trickled down. It was a local issue that trickled up. So if African-Americans understand that the power is in local politics, they missed every aspect of local history. So I said it to say, even something as small as a Confederate monument that was moved, I put a resolution together probably 3 months ago. It took 3 months to get those things done. People need to understand that there's a perspective of bipartisanship that maybe finds its way in places like Huntsville, Alabama, but this is the place also where Trump launched his campaign in Madison County. This is a place where Trump came and said, get those SOBs off of the field in Huntsville, Alabama. There absolutely is a divide inside of local politics around this idea of law and control and the reform movement on criminal justice reform. So we've been fighting for, not fighting against, fighting for higher levels of accountability ever since they started putting tear gas towards people marching to Montgomery. And at some point, it has now shifted at the local level to make statement pieces. As I tell you, we just moved the Confederate monument. That does not fix everything, but it's a statement piece to let individuals know this is a first step of many. So local legislation has power, though it is not inherently put at a Republican or Democratic piece because it is a nonpartisan position. Mayors and city councilmen have more power ever right now to face things like criminal justice reform, as well as marijuana reform and legal reform in the African-American community, but be more progressive because those things are immediate. If I put a resolution together today, it happens tomorrow. It does not have to go through Congress, it doesn't have to go through Senate. The president don't have to see it. I can reform a police department and chief. I can take down a Confederate monument and make progress happen today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And you raised an important point in that national politics actually kind of gets its cues from local politics, depending on, the old adage, all politics is local. So those who are running for national office try to match the temperature and the atmosphere of the environment in which they're trying to campaign. And in this case, Huntsville was the city that you mentioned, was where Trump had went and instigated this animosity towards those who were protesting against the national anthem, which was a huge issue from 2017 until, I believe, before the COVID outbreak. But, since then, we've even seen such like the George Floyd effect in terms of industries and businesses doing all kinds of things to accommodate and to amend certain policies to appeal more to people of color in hopes that this would present a new face. So local politics is a powerful, powerful entity. But Dr. Davis, you're running for county commissioner. What kind of challenges have you experienced in your race so far? I know it's been a long haul for you. And what kind of issues are you addressing that you believe your opponent is not addressing?
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for having me here again tonight. It's truly an honor to see you move forward in your other presentations that you've done. Before I begin, I must give a shout out to President Devin Keith. I have never gotten a chance to meet him personally, but I am born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama. And my start was on the Huntsville Youth Council back in 1987. I went to Oakwood Academy, Oakwood Elementary, graduated from Oakwood College. My parents there. So the night that you were sworn in and your election, I followed all of that back up here. And that really helped motivate me to move forward. I've been on the council for 12 years in South Bend City Council. And I saw what happened there, that you had to run against one of our most distinguished persons. And after that, I said, something? My job is not to just be here on the council for 12 years. My job is to now broaden myself to another situation. My daughter said, Daddy, you're going to run for commissioner and all these other things? I could have stayed at the council, but I think we have a responsibility to widen ourselves, because while the state of Indiana may be a red state, I believe that each one of our local localities, whether it's a city, whether it's a county, can be blue. I wore blue. I got my blue on tonight. I'm thinking blue. Okay, I'm thinking blue all the way. Blue bow tie, blue everything. Okay, it's gonna be a blue day. I'm gonna sing the blues on November the 6th. Okay, and so I think of enough localities, little small cities, little small counties can bring in some blue. Then we're gonna move over. I think even a lot of Republicans who normally sing the red are gonna be singing some blue because they don't even like what's going on in their own party. And you're going to find some of them do that. Locally, the issue that we're looking at here in South Bend, Indiana, I moved here in 1992, been here for 28 years. And I think the thing that we're looking at is environmental issues. One of the key things in my district is environment. They want to build this plant in our area that a lot of people don't want. It's destroying the farmland and it's destroying many of the green space. And I told them I grew up there when Huntsville is more progressive now. I have to use the GPS when I come home. I get lost in Huntsville. But when I was there, it was a lot more country. And so I know what it's like to work on the farm and work on other places. And I said, we got to preserve farmland. While we look at developing our cities, we still got to respect those who are farmland. And I told them, I said, hey, Black lives matter, farm lives matter. We all matter. And we got to put ourselves together. And many people in my district are coming to vote for me. I'm the first African-American to ever run for county commissioner in my whole county. And I did that in 1988. I was working on Dr. Prince Prayer's campaign when he ran for county commissioner in 1980. My pastor at Oakwood College Church 32 years ago challenged us to get out there and do that. So 32 years later, now with gray hair, I'm doing the same thing that Dr. Prayer did back in Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm doing it up here in South Bend, Indiana, because the local means something. So therefore, we have to be able to reach not only in urban areas, but to go out to Republican areas, to the farm life. And I told them, I said, hey, you need somebody that knows how to fight. Okay. And I know how to fight. I know how to stand up. I know how to work a minority. I've been a minority. Hello. And so therefore we fight. And I have had people who have told me they're voting for Trump and they're voting for me. They're voting for Biden. They're voting for me. And so that's the thing that we have to learn in a local area. There's national issues and we have to stay abroad of national issues. But even on the local issues, it's bread and butter issues. It's bread at the table issues. It's the store issues, the barbershop issues. And so we can focus on those issues, even though we may have some different disagreements on the national issues.
Dr. Davis, you raised a really good point in that, there are folks who, based on, how they vote at the top nationally, that doesn't necessarily dictate how they vote on the ballot.
No.
And, in 2016, there were folks who, for instance, said, I'm voting for the Senate candidate. For instance, I'm voting for or a gubernatorial candidate in my state, North Carolina at the time. Mm-hmm. I'm voting for Roy Cooper, but I'm also going to vote for Donald Trump for the presidency. Or I'm voting for this House member, but I'm still going to vote for the person on the other side of the aisle when it comes down to the federal politics. Mr. Hubbard, do you think that phenomenon is going to be, I guess, less evident as it was in 2016 because of this pandemic, because there seems to be such an emphasis now on not just voting, but voting down the ticket, straight party ticket. Mm-hmm. President Obama has been out as a surrogate for Biden. He's encouraged folks in Florida and other states through these drive-in rallies to not just vote for Biden and Harris, but to vote all the way down into the local level to ensure that there's one unified government. Do you think that this would prove successful in 2020?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And thank you again, because when I met you, I was like, listen, my schedule is wild, but if you reach out to me, if I can swing it, I'll be here. So thank you for reaching out, because I've said that to thousands of people and I can count on one hand the people who took me up on my offer. So props to you, Young Buck, for reaching out to OGs like myself and doing what you do, right? So it's an honor to be supportive of you. And like Devin said, I'm a little bit older than Devin, but Mike, remember me when you get there, son. Just remember I was kind to you when you on your come up, homie. Just remember that I was kind to you, right? Right, exactly. And for those of you brothers that are in office and running for office, props to you, because we need more of us in the game, right? There's so many of us. I'm an operative, right? So I'm Move On's congressional affairs guy. So I'm the guy behind the scenes, whispering and saying, Madam Speaker, this or Representative Presley, that, So like, but I'm in the game. And so it's an honor to see y'all as candidates in the game. And one last thing I'll say before I answer your question, I went to college with Jamie Harrison. He and I were at Yale together. So like, I am pulling all of my hair in support of that brother. So with respect to your question, Mike, I think that, I grew up in the church, and I mentioned that because like I work for Move On, but I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. So like I understand how people can see both sides of the issue. But this year, I would love for anyone to tell me what the Republican Party stands for other than rampant narcissism, other than bad pandemic planning. So for me, I think that there will be less of a split ticket this year because all we've seen on the federal level is, the Republican Party this week, they haven't done anything about pandemic relief, but they voted through a Supreme Court justice. Really? 230,000 people are dead. And you that hung up on the court, people don't have jobs and you hung up on court. Right? So that's one thing. The other thing I'll say is that I'm hopeful on the other side of this election that, as someone who used to teach civics, I'm hopeful that the Republican Party can stand for something other than virulent narcissism, because we do need a functioning other side. Like I am the progressive that went to business school, right? So I've told many of my friends, like, your policies are great. Who's going to pay for that? So like, I've been that guy who has like the progressive ideals, but also like the fiscal conservative. I am that person. So I'm hopeful that on the other side of this election, that people can get more towards like policy disagreements rather than just like narcissistic personality traits.
Thank you for that. And you had raised an important point, Mr. Hubbard, and that is, the thing that's on the foremost part of people's minds right now is COVID-19 relief. We're still experiencing an ongoing pandemic. The death toll has been increasing rather than decreasing. And despite what we're hearing about vaccines in the near future, we're seeing that this pandemic doesn't look like it has an end right now anytime soon. And we're hearing different deadlines in terms of when things can start to get back to a sense of normalcy. And that's like third quarter of 2021. 2022, and we're still in October of 2020. So it seems like COVID-19 has taken such a controlling, it's been such a controlling force in how people are voting this year. Over, I believe, 8 million people have already casted their ballots in the United States alone right now. And so I'm right. And so I'm, so many people have, well, the voting record itself has smashed the records of 2016. So we're seeing that people are awake. We're seeing that people are not going to be complacent, it seems. But does COVID-19 really force people to want something so different that Democrats can actually have something to look forward to on Tuesday night? Or are we looking for a situation where, because there's no national unified approach to this thing, depending on who you are, whether you think mask wearing is necessary or not, you're going to vote for the candidate that has the same kind of idea or respect for the virus that you have? Anyone can jump in and tackle this one.
I'll offer quickly. Joe Biden himself has said, even if you don't vote for me, like, I'll still be your president, right? So I think that there is a hunger for people to come together, right? Donald Trump and other folks have done their best to divide us. That is never the way that you tackle a situation, right? Any solution requires like leaning in and like coming together and those sorts of things. So I'm hopeful that that people will come together and realize that we've got to figure this out. Like, the coronavirus don't care if you rich, poor, black, white, Democrat or Republican. So for people that still think that this is a partisan issue, if the virus could speak to you, the virus would be like, I don't really care. So we need to approach, you know what I'm saying? Like, we need to approach this as one another and not the other.
When you look at places such as Nebraska, they canceled the Nebraska-Wisconsin game. And especially when you look at Nebraska part in a majority red state, people there have had to wake up and say, okay, this came home. As Miss Brother Hubbard just said there, people who are Republicans or people who are Democrats have gone to funerals this year with COVID. I've had classmates from Oakwood who were in their late 40s, early 50s, They're dead. You know, my dad is still alive, and he's 90 years old this year. I said, Daddy, I wish everybody, with all due respect to you, was in your age group passing away. But I said, this COVID has hit people who are younger people and younger than me. And when this issue has come to our homes, our churches, our neighborhood, our families, our friends, it has made a national issue become local issue. So every single person has a local issue. I'm trying to get ready to come back to Huntsville for the holidays and got to figure out, we all come to Huntsville? My sister lives in Atlanta, the other one lives in Tampa. Shall we all gather at Daddy's house, with him being older? I don't think so. So how are we going to do holidays? How are we going to do Christmas? How should we go to church or not go to church? It's become local. And the actions that presidents make, oftentimes we don't feel it. The actions that the governor makes, we don't necessarily feel it, but we feel when the city council makes it. We feel when the mayors make it. We feel when council community groups that are close to us make these decisions. Now we are feeling when the president does or does not do a situation. And I think that has brought everybody out to the ballot box, no matter where you are across this country and everything else, because if you get on a bus, get on a plane, get on wherever, you have to wear one of these things. I got a blue one too, making sure I'm thinking blue, y'all. And so, so therefore it's made the whole issue local. And if you don't deal with it, you're going to be impacted by the local vote this November 3.
So Ms. Tasha's having some connection problems, but when she joins, she's going to add a lot to the conversation. But I kind of want to transition back to the presidential race a little bit, because it's interesting that the Biden campaign decided, in the last few days of the election, to invest time and energy into the state of Georgia. And I've heard, the campaign manager for Bill Clinton in 1992, the one who's behind the old saying is "the economy's stupid." His name, I'm so sorry. I know him very well. James Carville. I'm sorry. James Carville. He said, when it comes down to the states to look at, that's going to be indicative of how the country goes. On Tuesday, Georgia is that state. Now, Georgia is interesting because they have 2 Senate seats that are opening. Kelly Loeffler was appointed. She's running for basically her first term. David Perdue is running for re-election. Raphael Warnock is running he's running for the seat that's open that Kelly Loeffler has, I believe. And then John Ossoff is running for David Perdue's seat. Now, what was just brought to my attention was that David Perdue had decided to forego another debate with John Ossoff because he decided to go ahead and use his time to campaign with President Trump. Now, we're seeing that, all eyes seem to be on this state. And I'm wondering if the Democrats are kind of getting ahead of themselves. I remember in the final days of 2016, there was talk of Texas going blue or a landslide. I had the privilege of having Beto O'Rourke on the program this past Sunday, and reports came out that he actually called the Biden and Harris campaign and said, hey, you want to actually invest time in Texas, because the counties he was able to flip, like Brewster, Harris, Culberson County, when he was running against Ted Cruz, can actually go blue again, he thinks, if we just put that last-minute effort in to the state. I want to get your thoughts as to whether you think investing in states that Democrats before a few months ago didn't think they'll have a chance of getting is a wise move in the final days of this campaign.
I'll offer something quickly. So the one thing that has changed, especially with respect to Georgia, since 2016 is Queen Stacey Abrams, right? So Stacey Abrams ran an election where, were it not for the malfeasance of the current governor, she might be the governor of Georgia. So she did what she could to push the envelope a little bit further, to make it more like to basically shine a light on the electoral ridiculousness that Mr. Kemp put forward, which makes it competitive, I would say. The other thing I would say also is that if Joe Biden, and if they think that Georgia's competitive, then that shows a Republican problem. That's not getting ahead of themselves. That shows that what you thought was super tight, if you've got to fight for what you thought was tight, then that means that you're on the defense. And I think that bodes well. I don't think that's getting ahead of anything per se. But that's what I would offer.
Yeah, and I'll say one inherently, Beto O'Rourke is arguing something I've been arguing before, which is playing the long game. you have a 4-year term, Lord willing, Trump does not win, but let's say you have a 4-year term that's guaranteed to end after this next term. Every senator sits for 6. Inherently, there's only been about 3 senators who, after their first term, lost the next race. So winning these Senate flip seats has more power. Trump does less with the loss of control of the House and the Senate. You don't even get the Supreme Court nomination, actually. So it's important to state that relatively more than anything, we could win more by winning South Carolina, Ossoff winning. And one example is actually the state of Alabama. The purple point of Alabama is important. Do I think that that is sustainable for a state, which is the Dixie, the Union itself? No. But do I think that's an example that a push for investment to states that could swing argues some sustainable point for 6 years? Absolutely. And there are places, New Hampshire is a good race that's going on right now. Potentially, you can see that same thing not only in Texas, but you can see that thing in Arizona, which is a really highly contested Senate race. You winning back the Senate, I would argue, has more value of perpetual policy push than you winning the presidency. Does the presidency have a value point for the blue wave really hitting, I think, and diluting, which is important for people to understand? Generational dilution of votes is really important. The same Republican that voted for Bush is not the same Republican right now that's voting for Trump. Inherently, when you're seeing the party, when you're seeing that crossover from Republican to Democrat, are those individuals from a different generation class, baby boomers, who are watching. I love you to death. But in my district is a good example. I know people who have a Trump sign and a Devin Keefe sign when I run for office. They carry a different value system, and they tend to be above a different age range. So there are on the line, I call them Republicans, who value different initiatives and conversations that look totally different than a Republican Party that is carrying this Trump wave. So it is so important. States like, again, Georgia, even if they can purple, even if they can go 1 for 1, that you are now affecting the Senate control. And Lord willing, if we can get both, I'll take them. But Lord willing, you get one of the two. That's the important play.
One of the things I think that one of the things I think that's important, even when you look at Reverend Warnock running, he's from Savannah. And with him being from Savannah, he can add that wing of the state plus the wing of Atlanta. The challenge that you saw with Senator Clinton is oftentimes she went to the big city. She would have Indianapolis to take on Indiana, Pittsburgh or Philly to take on Pennsylvania, Atlanta to take on Georgia. A big city, no matter how great they are, cannot beat a state. And one of the things that I told many of my colleagues back in 2008, when the Barack Obama Biden team came, they won the state of Indiana. And the reason they won the state of Indiana is most people think about Indianapolis, the Pacers and the Colts, and that's wonderful. But then if you pick up not only Indianapolis, you pick up Bloomington, you pick up Fort Wayne, then you come up on the 80-90 and you pick up Elkhart, South Bend, Gary, Indiana. You do that and let the smaller states get the rebounds and get all the tip ins, and then you have the big state to hit the 3-pointers. Then you can have a whole team come together. Okay, if you just rely on the outside shot to win the state, it's not going to make it. You got to have all these small little communities coming together with the big city. And that's what's happened in Georgia so many times. It's been Atlanta versus everybody else, and Atlanta has lost. Okay, now you have Savannah and all these other small. You got to pick up Columbus. You got to pick up Albany. You got to go down to Cairo. You got to pick up all of those Bainbridge, Georgia, and tie them in to Atlanta, and then you win. So again, you got to go back to the local cities, the local small towns, and everything else to tie into the big city. As Democrats have not always done that. We've been in big urban places. We got to go to the country mamas and country daddies and sit up in the places like I have to be by myself. I told my daughter I want her to be more comfortable and just as comfortable being an all black crowd as she's in an all white crowd, all city crowd or all urban crowd. When we can do that, our message can go not just to the urban areas, but out to the country. And then we can raise up and turn blue again.
Yeah, I want to hop in on that too. Also, man, I think we have to also understand that Joe Biden is rolling in the dough right now, and he has the resources to do great things, man. And by him going to Georgia again, I agree with Brother Keith on here, man. It's helping out those Senate candidates, and I think that, to me, I always say the most important body of branch to me is the Senate because you got those 6-year terms. And again, if you can definitely help out, we can win just one of them. It'd be horrible. It'd be great for us. Again, Jamie. I'm telling you, I think there's something brewing in the South. I don't know what it is, right? But it's something brewing in the South. This is the second competitive race we had in Georgia. We got a competitive statewide race in South Carolina. Like, wow, like I cannot believe it. Like South Carolina, and then again we had Alabama as well. So there's a new South brewing here, and I think the old South is dying out. Where you have candidates now that are more like you and I, man, primarily of color, and we're able to appeal more to younger voters and as well as suburban women. I think those two key groups are what's driving the momentum of this new wave in the South. Again, I don't think, again, I don't want to say who's going to win or not, but I do think, hey, he's making Trump play defense when Trump knows that the two most critical states that he must win is Pennsylvania and Florida. So if he's not there and he's focusing on Georgia, it shows a bigger sign. I think that's what we should be looking at moving forward.
So in addition to this, this decision to focus on states that traditionally, since 1992, at least for Georgia, Democrats really conceded to the Republican Party. Trump has spent more time on the campaign trail than Biden has spent. And the reason is because of the COVID-19 precautions. Trump has had these rallies in defiance of CDC guidelines on Dr. Fauci's advice, while Biden says that he's not trying to host, quote, super spreader events. But at the same time, you have other factors, such as Mike Bloomberg spending his own money in Florida, the state of Florida, and then now investing or allocating some of that money to the state of Texas. And then you have the CBCF, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, announcing $2 million in an ad campaign specifically aimed at trying to win over Black men. And so, Ms. Tasha, do you think that the fundraising and all of the monetary resources that the Biden camp seems to have on its side is enough to overcome the fact that Trump has spent more time on the ground in terms of campaigning?
Well, I think that it's definitely going to be a bit of an uphill battle. We do often, understand that, of course, spending time on the ground is very important, and getting that face-to-face contact with your voters and your electorate and your constituents. So I think that one of the biggest mistakes that Hillary Clinton made was taking for granted certain states that traditionally voted blue, and not spending adequate enough time there actually meeting and greeting and allowing voters to really understand her and get to know her and get a feel for her. And as we saw that was very disastrous in the 2016 elections, with a lot of states in the Rust Belt who normally traditionally went Democratic, and we're talking about Democratic for 7 presidential elections, all of a sudden flipping. So I definitely think that they do not want to be overconfident in thinking that their presence is not necessarily needed just because they may be able to outspend. We definitely don't want to take that for granted and then have a situation where we're looking at Trump in positions to have a second term.
Thank you. And that's interesting because there was an assumption last time that there was a blue wall in place. We kept hearing about this blue wall. Now that coalition that was in place during the 2 Obama elections, 08 and 12, was just presumed to be there in 16. But now we're seeing that there's more of the Democrats seem to be on edge, even though the polling suggests, for instance, in Pennsylvania, Biden's at 53%, Trump's at 46%. They're not really taking much comfort in polls. And I think a lot of people have lost faith in the polling system since the 2016 election. But, when we're looking at the efforts that they're making towards demographics that they traditionally had the support of, African-American women, folks in the Midwest, folks in the Rust Belt like Michigan and Pennsylvania, do these efforts to try to win these folks back prove successful? I'm sorry, there's a little feedback.
And I want to say on that, one, why people like Mr. Hubbard are important. When I came down and ran, this was not the plan for my life. I'm not as intelligent as you, just a little hood kid that made it. We made it very relevant to those people who are outside the normal political sphere. So a lot of our endorsements came from yoga instructors. They came from barbers. They came from individuals who are mechanics. I mean, one of our ads quite literally was a mechanic saying, I never really get involved in city council races, but I'm voting for Devin Keith. And what happened is in the early Obama, if you remember, the introduction of that social media wave, that viral share happened early on, and he latched onto it. You have to take non-contemporary mediums and connect to individuals to make it relevant, because the assumption is that the people who vote are super voters, right? That's not a relevant assumption anymore. What Trump did was attack ad place points all over social media to really reinvent this perspective of this social media integration between political campaigns, political ads, and the person you vote for. So what I think has happened now, which is a blessing, and again, I wish it wasn't because of COVID, but the fact that Cardi B has she's interviewed the potential president of the United States. People might talk and say whatever they want. Her interview has a value point. And it goes back. I tell you, one of the most amazing things, me and Senator Book to talk about it was, y'all remember Joe the Plumber, right? That comparative connection is what Hillary never did. And when you don't have that comparative, tangible connection to middle class or even culture-based America, right? I don't care how lame P. Diddy looked with them big old white t-shirts running around saying, I vote, it had a value point in the city of New York. So you have to pick non-conventional campaign supporters and make them champions in a way that it makes those people who follow those individuals from the local all the way up now to the presidential believe that this is important. And what the blessing is, though it's unfortunate, COVID has allowed time for non-conventional. I mean, the best thing that Biden did was the hiring. If you look at his staff, it's culture-based. That was the smartest thing he ever did, was make a culture-aware staff. And that has bled into what you've seen as the awareness and the outpour of what I believe will be the largest turnout for African-American males and women in any race in history.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
And what President Keith just talked about there, having that diverse staff speaks louder than your words. You don't have to get up there and say, I'm a black candidate. Or like Hillary said, women, our time has come kind of attitude. You don't do that. Elections are to bring you closer and to show what we have in common, not what we have in differences. And we have to be able to deal with that. And that's when you look at that 2008 campaign with President Obama. He wasn't going around just saying, well, I'm a black candidate. We knew he was black. He was looking for things to help to make him more common with everybody else. And we have to look for what is that going to help me when I go out to suburban areas, when I go out to the places where I'm the only person that's African American. What's going to make me feel comfortable and want them feel comfortable in talking to me? We got to look at that issue. We got to go beyond that. In 1996, when I first started running, and even up to 2007, I was scared to put my picture on something. Because prior to running for office before President Obama, to put your picture, especially in a state like Indiana, even in Alabama, they say, well, that's a black man running. After 2008, it's been an honor. Oh, I put my picture up, put my bow tie. Everybody knows I'm the bow tie guy. Have my image to put out there. Bow tie, we tie everything together. Okay, that's what we do. That's what the bow tie means. We tie it all together. Wherever you come from, we tying you together. We all be one family because we all need to have somebody to speak for. But we can put our picture out there now, and people are not as frightened. People say, well, President Obama didn't do nothing. The best thing he did was just to get to office. Just to be in office, day one. If he did nothing else from day one, I was so excited because it had somebody that looked like me to get to that office. Now, look at all of us on this screen here. We can now run for office, and it helps to break that barrier in such a powerful way that we can move forward. And I think with Hillary Clinton, they just took it for granted that everybody was just going to show up there. The Obama coalition was just going to show up there. No, you got to work for it. Every generation got to work for the generation ahead of them. They just can't take it. And so, well, my daddy did it. No, just because my daddy did it doesn't mean I'm going to get it. I got to fight for it too. And I think if every generation takes that attitude, we can continue to win it and go blue.
So really quick,
I want to pick up on something briefly. Brother Keith said that So one is that like Captain Obvious here, like it's not 2016, it's 2020. Like so, like 2020 is showing us anything. Like it ain't. 2020 is like, nah, I'm me. Like I ain't nobody else. Like if 2020 were to have an attitude, it'd be like I'm me, and don't you dare try and say, like 2020 is on it, right? Like I'm me. Don't you compare me to like. So that's what I think 2020 would offer. But so thank you for laughing at my joke. But I'm just trying to keep it 100. You offer a good point about the cultural aspect. So I worked for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and what we did is what we tried to do was we used like our events and our messaging to get talking about socialized medicine as a cultural talking point. So now everyone's like Medicare for all, because we had like these shows with like either musicians or otherwise. Like Bernie, I know Bernie well. He talks like this and he's not very, like he's pretty, he's hella boring in some ways, but we took that dude and made him culturally relevant. And now he's done his own thing with that. Right. So to your point about culture, when we make political issues cultural issues, that's when transformation takes place. Right. Like that creates the sea change that we're hoping for. So people may talk a little bit about Sister Harris, but when she showed up in her Chucks, like that was accessible for some people. Right. Like when when Mike Pence did what he did on the debate stage, and she was just like, OK, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So like that, people were just like, look at her, like serious, fierce, and so making politics cultural is the best way for all of us to do this. And the last thing I'll say, Devin, is that like, man, look, Yale's is where I went to school, man. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, homie. Like I was just a book nerd who kept reading. You know what I'm saying? So like, I ain't smart. I just read a lot.
Let me just piggyback, because I want everybody who's watching this understand. That's nothing new for Black folks. The civil rights movement based itself around cultural awareness, right? There used to be large concerts. Aretha Franklin, though the integration of gospel music would happen, they would hold large African-American concerts and festivals in support of the civil rights movement and the NAACP. We have always integrated political policy, progressiveness, as well as cultural awareness to make and mesh the two, so that those two things carried a louder message. And that, I don't know why we, between like 1980 to 2008, got away from that, but that has been everything for African Americans to make a national stage. Is where we've taken culture, taken our policy push, and meshed the two, because we know that the power of our voice is quantified and compounded when individuals who don't look like us are aware of either our culture and our policy, and mixing the message allows them to make it more palpable. It is really easy, and it has been done. Like he said with Bernie, because my brother Randall Woodfin down in Birmingham, we were talking about it as well. Sometimes somebody who raps tells your story better than somebody who can preach. And sometimes somebody who can preach can tell your story better than somebody who raps. But if you don't have two people telling your story, there's only one message being told.
So what's interesting with this election is that both campaigns seem to be targeting specifically African-American men. The Trump campaign under the leadership of Brad Parscale had set the goal of 15%, stripping away 15% from the Democratic Party. The Biden campaign has also came out with new ads. I remember this one ad where there were African-American men narrating the ad, and at the end of the ad, one said, "It's not about Biden; it's about your kid's future." And in that kind of way, it kind of resonated, I think, with what Dr. Davis was saying, and that the concerns of an African-American man is not that different from a white man in this country, and that you're looking for your child's future to be secure. Now, of course, there are underlying factors. Of course, the African-American men are subjected to police brutality and other systemic inequalities that a white American man would never have to experience. But at the foundation, that's the goal. That's what they want. 6,631,565 votes have been cast, according to CNN. This is about, I believe, a little over a quarter of the votes cast, I guess, before the 2016 election took place, so the early votes. So folks are coming out in big numbers. And I think this is more replicative of the 2018 midterm turnout. By Tuesday, I think we're going to see something that reflects that more. But as it relates to both campaigns targeting this specific demographic and not seeming to take it for granted, do you think that one campaign has done better than the other in this respect? just stepping back and taking more of a neutral approach to it, do you think that one campaign has done more than the other? And I know the Trump campaign has had surrogates like that NFL player who's been introducing Senator Loeffler in Georgia. They've had a lot of black men on the Republican National Convention stage make the case for thinking independently, as they said. But do you think that this would prove to yield some results? I'm going to open up the floor. Trequez?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, man, I always say if you want to know, the sway of a black man, how they're going to vote, it's at the barbershop, all right? And to be completely honest with you, man, I've over time, the last, I want to say 2 years, I want to say I've heard a growing likeness for Donald Trump, because just some people just don't like politicians, right? And they get some people get the same vibe with Joe Biden, and that's just the nature of the beast of it. But again, most of them do say, man, at the end of the day, I don't feel as if either candidate represents me in its totality. But they say they understand. I think if you're talking about someone who's not upset with the system, but I think black men at the same rate as how it was in 2018. 2016, excuse me. Black men are kind of not looking for a politician. They're looking for someone to get things done. Again, I fully support Joe Biden, but I'm just being honest with you, man. My conversations in the barbershop, I'm saying it time and time again, of people looking for someone who's not a typical politician, who's looking for someone to get things done. Now, ultimately, they always say, at the end, they're going to come home and vote for Joe Biden, or any candidate. It would have been Bernie Sanders, anybody, because they don't feel as if they can vote for racists. But the systemic nature of that factor of them being tired of politics, so to speak, that I feel like that there's an underlining anger there, that they're just tired of the system, and they kind of want to see issues directly affecting us. Perfect example. When I went to the barbershop, this was after the debate, the previous debate, and I think Donald Trump said, I did this, and this for the black community. I'm more than Abraham Lincoln and all that, right? Black people, of course, was pissed off, but then you have some people saying, well, hey, what have Democrats done for me lately? And the same dogma or the narrative that they're playing. So people are asking questions. I don't think that it's enough for them to vote for Trump, but I do think there are people who are just totally against politicians, and I think just having someone to get things done is what they're looking for. But ultimately, they're not going to vote for a racist. They're not going to vote for Donald Trump. So, yeah, but that's how I think the black male are feeling. But going to the barbershop, man, I'm telling you, that's the soul of how black men really feel. They'll speak their energy in the barbershop more than anything. Not saying it's right, but you'll hear that energy in the barbershops.
I agree with you, Mr. McCall. I just left the barbershop, so I kind of know. I think this. There was a misconception that was been put out there in the media. Let's go back to the state of Alabama when Doug Jones won. They kept saying the black woman turned out. The black woman turned out. That's true, but also the black man turned out to that race too. Okay, and so there has been, and I've seen on the MSNBC, I just can't say this is a Fox issue. There's been a slight put down to say that the black woman has been the backbone of the Democratic Party. With all due respect to black women, it has been a combination. I don't like when they separate that, because that goes back to me of the slavery days of putting the black woman ahead and she can say everything, but the black man has to stay quiet. And it separates our families like that. That's not good. It was, when you look at the numbers, when both of them are voting at 90+%, there is no significant difference between. to put the black woman and to put the black man has voted. So why do you go out there and say, well, the black woman has done that, and almost in the sense of saying that we haven't done that? And when you hear that on a regular basis on CNN and MSNBC, and I'm not even discussing Fox yet, when you hear that on the Democratic side being said that the black man is not speaking up, then it was a gold mine for the Republicans to jump out there and to move forward with that. To say that, well, Biden's only going to consider black women or whatever to be his running mate. It was almost like, well, we're not going to be even in the running. And I think we have to be very careful about that. And so when we have more black women and black men running to support each other and lifting each other up, not being played against each other, then you will minimize that. And I think that's where a lot of that issues where the Republicans saw that and they jumped on it and they moved forward. Even when in the President Obama administration, where it wasn't a movement toward inviting historically black colleges to the White House, the Republicans jumped on that and they invited a lot of the black presidents to the White House. Okay. And they jumped on it fast. I mean, with all due respect to the Obama administration, they should have been the ones jumping on that one. Okay. And they left that one open. And the Republicans jumped on it. Smart move. Now they try to come back, of course, with Kamala Harris being from Howard, and that's always great. But we have to realize this is a fight for the soul of America on both sides. Okay. And if you leave any crack open on anything else, the other side is going to take it, and they should. If they don't, they are not good political strategists. But we have to be careful on how we describe our victories. It's not just the black woman or the black man. It's a family that's coming together, or the white woman, we have to be very careful about that. And when you look at almost all the news, it's being that it almost goes back to the football game. Hi, mom. Hi, mom. When the people score touchdowns, or mom, you never hear anybody say, hi, dad. I just scored a touchdown. It's always hi, mom. With all due respect to my mother who's resting in her grave, you still got to have some high dads.
Oh, well, let me offer something quickly, and then I got to go, Mike. So I think what people should ask the questions, right? Because, you know, as someone who works in Washington, D.C., for the progressive left, like sometimes the most racist place I've been is with a whole bunch of liberals, right? So like we do need to, you know, I need to keep that 100, right? And what we need as Black people and brown people is to heal, right? So like we need to take agency in our situation and, you know, to some extent have a bit of self-determination, right? So I'm actually a registered independent who caucuses with the Democrats like Bernie Sanders. But if I'm just trying to figure out who's going to help me come up, who's going to help me and help my people come up. You know what I mean? In this instance, it seems, and I actually know Joe Biden and Kamala Harris personally, I know them to be who they say they are. But I'm also of the opinion that if the Republicans were talking sense and not trying to exploit us against one another, I might be actually persuaded to give them a little bit more lip service and earshot. But like, I think that we as a people need to figure out a way to respect our wholeness and not seek for other people to help us. We need to help ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. And I just want to, just emphasize this race is tight. 538 polling has Biden and Trump basically neck and neck in all of the key battleground states that seem to be up for grabs. Just within the past few days between October 26th and the 28th in New Hampshire, for instance, Biden is at 58%. Trump is about just a few points below him at about 50%, I believe. Georgia, October 27th to 28th, Biden 48%, Trump 46%. Florida, everyone is looking at Florida all of a sudden. All of the huge names are descending on that state to make their last pitch for why their campaign is the one that should win that state in its electoral votes. You see that Biden is at 50%, Trump's at 45%, according to a IBD TIPP poll. So it looks like no matter what, this is going to be an all-nighter. And many people have been saying this could be an election week. This could even draw out to be a 2-week process in counting votes because of the fact this is a mail-in ballot process. But what's interesting to me is that President Trump, who was elected by less than the majority of people in this country, was able to put in place 1/3 of the Supreme Court. And I'm worrying about a scenario where 2000 replicates itself, in that there's doubt on the results on November 3rd or whenever the mail-in ballots are counted. And so this becomes a state issue. It goes to the state Supreme Court and eventually finds its way in the Supreme Court of the United States. And now that you have a 6-3 tilt, you have a situation where with the Justice Amy Coney Barrett now, along with the 5 other conservative appointees, it looks like the odds are in Trump's favor. I'm wondering if you have a similar concern, or whether you think that Biden can win in such a decisive way that doesn't get that far. Ms. Tasha?
Yes, I definitely have grave concerns regarding Justice Barrett. I think Trump definitely set the tone, and he said that he was looking for a judge that would overturn the ACA. He's looking for a judge that is essentially going to push Republicans' agenda of ultra conservatism to the forefront of America. And by being allowed to push Amy Coney Barrett through, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died 38 days ago, and they have just now sworn her in. So it's definitely huge concerns. There's huge concerns for many things like the ACA. There's huge concerns for same-sex marriage. There's huge concerns for Roe v. Wade. And then, of course, there's huge concerns for what happens in the scenario that you put forth. If we do have a tight race, are we looking at another scenario where Republicans will again be able to steal the election like they did from Al Gore? Are we going to be in that scenario? So I think that was a large concern for everybody, and I think it should be a concern for all of us, because as we know, the Electoral College is the one that selects who the president is going to be. The popular vote, which is what should count, because that's who the people are most in favor of, does not select who we're going to have. So we could run into another situation like we did with Hillary, where I think she won the popular vote by, what was it, 3 million votes or something to that effect, and yet Donald Trump was able to be president. So I think that there's grave concerns on all ends pertaining to what it's going to mean for a number of reasons, and how Justice Barrett and her spearheading this conservative agenda will ultimately change the trajectory of our country and the landscape, and us as a woman, and as well us as people of color.
I think this is how I look at 2000 election and the Supreme Court. I used to coach a little Bible Bowl team in my church in Huntsville, and I used to tell our team when we went down to Birmingham, we have to win big. If we get in a close game with the team in Birmingham and they got their refs, they got their judges, even though it was a church Bible Bowl game, I said, we're not going to get the calls. So if we're going to play in a close game and we lose, don't be coming and fuss at me. I said, what we have to do when we go to Birmingham is we got to win, and we got to win big. I don't even want it to be blamed on the refs. If we rely on the refs, we're not going to get it. So let's get it in this car and head down to Birmingham, knowing that we're not going to rely on the refs. When I think about 2000, Al Gore should not have relied on Florida. He should have relied on Tennessee, his home state, and he should have bonded with President Clinton and sent Clinton to Arkansas. Clinton could have gotten him Arkansas. He could have won and stayed in touch with Tennessee. I'm in Indiana, been up here for 28 years, but I keep in touch with Huntsville, Alabama. You keep in touch with your home place, okay? And so therefore, you do not lose your home state, and you don't lose the president's home state, and then rely on your opponent's brother, where he's the governor, to try to win that state. That is ridiculous. And then blame it on the Supreme Court. That's just like me telling those young people down there, don't blame those Birmingham refs. We knew that when we got in the car, okay? So therefore, we cannot rely on Florida. We better win Pennsylvania. We better win Michigan. We better win Wisconsin. We better take on out there in Arizona. If we down to Florida again, oh my Lord, it's ridiculous, okay? When I run, my hope and my prayer is to win next week. One thing I want to make sure I win is my precinct, where I am, okay? My neighbors. If it goes bad that night and the other guy gets me, I'm going to check my precinct afterwards. And I'm going to see, did my neighbors vote for me? Did my wife, did my daughter? Okay, at least my street voted for me, Okay, when that doesn't happen, then you got to. That has happened to me before. I had to go back to the drawing board and say, well, what happened here? Okay, and so that's how I look at this. When Al Gore lost Tennessee and Arkansas, and when I'm blaming Florida, no. We know we want to have the judges, so let's not play them. Let's win it with the vote. Let's turn blue.
I agree. Now I want to piggyback on that. We got to win big. We got to win bigly.
Thank you. I like that. Put that.
We got to win it bigly. Bigly. Hands down. I mean, because again, but I always believe it's as we're seeing the numbers now. This is different. 2016, man. I feel like we felt entitled in 2016. This is a totally different year. The numbers are high, man. Every day at our early voting poll sites, man, people waiting hours to go vote. So South Carolina is going to be, although it's not on the forefront of it, man, South Carolina is going to be another state that is going to shock this country, man. It's going to shock this country. But again, we all know when there's high turnout, Democrats win. There's a low turnout. They always say, God forbid it rains, right? If there's a low turnout, Democrats lose, right? So if there's any indication of how this race is going, not saying to get cynical at all, but turnout is high, right? So I'm hoping we can win bigly because I'm very concerned that on election day, if Trump is winning the actual in-person ballots, I'm very concerned that he will try his best to try to stop those mail-in ballots from being counted. He's going to say fraud. He already set it up, right? And that's what they do. They set it up. We call fraud on this, fraud on that, even though there's been no cases of fraud being proven. He's already made his case for the Supreme Court. He was calling fraud since July. All right. So hopefully on election day, at least Biden is up. So we don't have to worry about, giving it to the Supreme Court. Because ultimately, man, what I learned in law school is, at the end of the day, although the judiciary is supposed to be nonpartisan and neutral, it's all politics, man. It is all politics, and it's personal opinions on this type of case. And Supreme Court is supposed to stay out of the political thicket. This is the thicket, and they're going to try to get in this one. They're going to try to get Donald Trump in there. So hopefully we're winning on election day. And I want to also add this too, because I think we need to get get more blunt in our actions as Democrats, man. If this 6-3 majority court overturns ACA, which is up for grabs, they overturn Roe v. Wade, many environmental protections. All of this stuff is up for grabs with this new court that's on there. I am in favor of packing the court. All right. I think it has to happen, man. And it happened before, and this was during FDR time, right? He was moving forward with packing the court, and then there was something called the switch in time that saved 9, right? Where you had these 2 justices who always voted against all of these New Deal initiatives, and FDR got tired of essentially not able to move his agenda forward. He said, well, let's pack the court. And what happened was those 2 justices decided, and instead of forcing the Supreme Court to ultimately change for history, they decided to, balance the court. And hopefully here they decide to balance the court. You've already saw where Justice Roberts is now trying to be more moderate. But I'm looking at the list. I don't think Kavanaugh can be moderate. I don't think Gorsuch can be. So I don't know who's going to be that other swing vote, man. So we are in trying times, right? And you're seeing now the president and the Senate are nominating young jurists, and they're hungry. This is different than old times. Ginsburg was almost 65 years old when she was appointed, right? This is totally different, man. Totally different. So again, pack the court, make DC and Puerto Rico states, abolish the filibuster, get rid of the electoral college. I mean, we got to play hardball, man. They're playing hardball. They'll do it. We have to start doing the same thing. We're serious about, moving a progressive agenda forward in this country. I know.
One thing I think that is why Vice President Biden had his speech in Warm Springs, Georgia, yesterday. He went to not only Atlanta, but he went to Warm Springs, Georgia. Warm Springs, Georgia was, of course, the cradle of where President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that was his place. And I think he was sending us a signal when President Reagan went to Philadelphia, Mississippi to launch his campaign, or like when President Keith said when President Trump went to Huntsville to launch his campaign with what he said with to the athletes and everything else. People choose different spots, and Vice President Biden went to Warm Springs, Georgia. And I think he went there to send a message to people. It was a very subtle message that if this happened and it became 6-3, which it did happen, he will take on the Warm Springs kind of method. And that was FDR. And I think that's why when I heard he was going there, I said, good move.
Pat the court.
Right, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback off what Mr. McCall was saying. I'm also in favor of packing the court. I think that's necessary because the only way that the Supreme Court maintains legitimacy is by having a checks and balances system. We have to have the full electorate represented. It doesn't work if we only have one agenda moving forward, because then you ostracize the rest of the country. So we have to be able to move forward in a way where we allow fairness to take place. And when we look at packing the court, I don't really see it necessarily as packing the court, because remember, Obama was stopped from having his justice placed on the court, even though Anton Scalia died in February. And then McConnell and Lindsey Graham, they all came up with all of this, unnecessary stuff, fake policies, fake procedures, precedences that had never been set to stop him and block him from picking. And then again, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, they ignored the precedences that they had set, ignored the vast majority of the populace when the polls showed 72% of Americans favored the next president, whomever that may be, to make that choice. So in the event that Joe Biden would win, essentially we would have been, we're down to two justices. So packing the court and increasing that size is really us only being able to make up for what was actually taken from us. Yeah. So that's so to me, I definitely do support moving forward and packing.
10 seconds. I know this is a big time show, so I want to clarify myself but they catch me on the record. I want to say this though. The reason why I'm saying this is because what Ms. Bryant said, they legitimately stole 2 seats. They stole 2 seats. They did not let Merrick Garland be appointed with over 200 plus days, and they ramshacked another one within 39 or 38 days. They stole 2 seats. So what they did was pack the court. They packed the court, right? And if Democrats did the same exact thing, Republicans got the gut to do this, right? Republicans, they don't care. Republicans are already showing you they have the guts to expand the court, right? Or pack the court, because they're doing it now. And if it was the opposite way around, I will bet my last dollar Mitch McConnell and Republicans will expand the court and make it so that their issues are being, fairly, it's not judicial, fairly heard in front of the court, essentially. But yeah, they'll pack the court, man. So I had to clarify myself there, Mike.
Really? No. And really quick, because the Supreme Court made 2 moves that I think didn't get a lot of attention, that like the attention it should have gotten. The Supreme Court yesterday, they decided to leave in place the status quo in 2 swing states, North Carolina and Pennsylvania. In North Carolina, Republicans were attempting to block an extension of the ballot receipt deadline. This is significant because there's a heavy focus on mail-in ballots this year because of the pandemic. In addition to that, in Pennsylvania, Republicans tried to challenge they tried to challenge election laws there too, and the Supreme Court decided not to expedite the Republican challenge to the Pennsylvania deadline. So, but what was significant to me was that they also left open they left open the option that they can hear the case in Pennsylvania after the election. What's also key in this is that Amy Coney Barrett decided to recuse herself in both of these, and I think this was a move to show, because there's this huge buzz around whether or not Amy Coney Barrett is going to be that force that basically allows the court to hand deliver the presidency to Donald Trump. And I think this was a move on her part to ensure that she can, on day one, show that she's going to present an image of neutrality. But I think that when this gets further down the road, then we're going to start to see her take more of an active role in deliberations. I wanted to get your thoughts on whether you think how you think these two scenarios that the Supreme Court considered plays into this election, and whether you think you should be hopeful as to whether or not the court would try to stay out of the electoral process when it pertains to state election law, or whether you think the court is headed to, if things play out like they did in 2000, a situation where they take a more active role.
The Honorable Justice Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett, is from South Bend, Indiana. She lives here in the same area, that same city that I live in. So I respect her as a fellow person, a sister that lives in the city. And while I have serious different views on what happened, I will say this, and it goes back to what I said earlier about President Keith. We have to be very careful, and with all due respect to Justice Ginsburg, I honestly believe that we can stay at a spot too long and then blame everybody when we are not able to get to the finish line. I think that there was so much weight on the 2016 election. And I think, like Mr. Attorney McCall said, that we took it for granted. And that was horrible. That's the time that she should have been replaced there. They built their bench. They built their bench for years. Okay. And we have to start looking at the benches when people are in elementary running for student government, when they are in 8th grade, 6th grade. And I work in middle school. And when I'm looking at 6th and 7th and 8th graders, I'm looking at my future bosses. These are the people going to take me to retirement. Okay. And they're going to be in leadership. I have to take it like that. And so we have to get in office, but yet while we get there, we can't stay there. And we have to recognize, as we start having health issues and other things, let's look at some of the young talent that's coming behind us, put them there so we don't have to face them. Now, yes, young people can die too, and that could have happened there too. That is true. But in the circle of life, my gray hair, I should die before everybody on this whole program. Okay, y'all should be there to say some words at my funeral. Say some good stuff now. Make sure it's good. All right. But the thing about it, I should not be at yours. You all should be at mine. And we have to start planning like that as Democrats looking down the road. So I'm hoping again that we don't have to rely on those things. I think the justice was wise in not making her decision yesterday. But I think if that turns around and we have to rely on Pennsylvania again, and it's going to get down to the heat, I think she's going to come in and make her decision. And I think she's going, if they need her vote, I think she's showing up. I think that was just a common courtesy just to say, I'm here. But if that vote is needed in November, she's showing up. Again, so we cannot rely on that state. We have to rely on Wisconsin, Michigan, and everybody else.
Yeah, and if I can say one outro, I don't know what time we're leaving. This is what I teach my students, that we have not magnified the idea. In verses, we talk about partisanship, that there's this minor league presentation that has happened from the Republican Party. When I say minor league, they have fostered talent much better than the Democratic Party. Now, this election was the first time that 4 of the top candidates started in local politics. Ben O'Rourke was a city councilman. Joe Biden was a city councilman. Cory Booker started as a city councilman. Kamala Harris, she started in state local politics. But on the inverse side, in the Senate, the average age currently is above 65. And the average amount of individuals who started in local politics represent 57%. And when I say local, that's just city, not just state. We talk about what's going on right now in Kentucky. Mitch McConnell has been a lifelong politician. They have duped the American society to believe this idea of longevity of a lifelong politician is a Democratic side view. It's not. Republicans have been in politics much longer through local and state politics as they ascended to the federal level. Mo Brooks, who is unfortunately my congressman, started in local politics as a county commissioner. And that's the reason that Dr. Davis is so important, is because what he's doing is, and what we have to do as a generation to come, is light a torch. I'm supposed to make it brighter. What has happened about a large amount of the people who have held the majority of ownerships, even African Americans who have gotten into ownership. I mean, this is no disrespect to John Lewis. I've had lunch with him. I've been blessed by him. But we do not foster talent to follow us. Elijah Cummings is another example. When people leave that are our societal points of reference about leadership, we have it's a vacuum. And that field point surprises us. When Republicans lose power, there was no idea that there was going to be a Bush 2. They thought it was going to be the older Bush. And inversely, Donald Trump supersedes that and comes in. That doesn't mean in any way that the Bush family doesn't have power by any means. There's so much talent in the Republican Party, they can pick 21 people to run for office. And Democrats are stuck, no disrespect to Joe Biden, because I support him in every way. We're stuck with our best version is somebody who is living on the coattails of an African-American president. Joe Biden is not a presidential nominee without a Barack Obama. That's how bad our talent pool is. So our talent pool has not been put together or fostered or minor league in the way that it should.
And really quick, this has been such an amazing conversation, but I'm seeing someone in the comments, and they're voicing something that I've heard many people up until yesterday say, and that Biden is a corrupt politician, and Biden said something about he doesn't want his children growing up in a concrete jungle. We really have to look at the historical context of everything when we're making these decisions. The 1994 crime bill, everyone in agreement seems to that has bipartisan agreement. It seems today that was not a good piece of legislation. But when you go back to that time period, you had African American pastors, you had Al Sharpton, you had Bernie Sanders voted for that bill. And so the idea and the notion back then was, whenever you make this a crime and order election, Republicans are the strong party, and the Democrats are going to lose because they're soft on crime. Willie Horton, 1988, the campaign ad with the revolving door, and Dukakis tanked. He was leading in the polls in the summer of '88. All of a sudden, by the fall, it's a landslide, and partly due because of the mind of Lee Atwater, who was the strategist, who was on the George H.W. Bush campaign, who was the mastermind behind that ad. And as it relates to the concrete jungle comment, this was the issue. The environment back then was that you're having a forced, and Kamala Harris touched on the debate, I think the very first debate of this election cycle for the Democratic side. You had a situation where cities were using their bus systems to force integration. And so there was a Supreme Court case that actually was designed to, that actually had considered whether or not this was a just use of the city's resources. And they decided that if the city is not imposing racial segregation measures, then the city cannot put in place measures when there's nothing to point to. We can disagree or agree about that, but when we're looking at Biden's comments, what he said was, I don't want to have a situation where this busing system creates such a confusing situation where it's a jungle, but people have taken it out of context and try to portray this picture. And no, Biden's not perfect. He has said things that he had to come back and say, I'm sorry for. But when I compare him to the alternative, and I see that the president put out an ad in the New York Times during the Central Park 5 case that was going on in 1989, and to this day has not apologized for it. There's no real comparison to me now. Now, everyone may walk away with their own views, but to me, the facts speak for itself. The records speak for itself. I see that the evening is drawing close. I want to go ahead.
I'm 52 years old. And when I was a person who was on the Oakwood student government back in 1987, 88, the way I thought at 20, 21 years old, it was pretty good in the 80s. My clothes that I wore in the 80s were pretty good. I wouldn't wear them tonight. Okay, doesn't mean they were bad in the 80s. They would just be bad for 2020. Okay, when you stay in government for a while, And I look at my old pictures in '88 when I was working with on Dr. Prayer's campaign. I had my high top. Okay. Now I got this. Does that mean that my style and my change and everything else was I bad then and good now? No. What I have to do, and the longer you stay in government, you have to explain why you may have a different point of view. What I parented my daughters. Some decisions I said that she couldn't do one time, I said, you know what? Go ahead and do that. Did that mean, was I wrong the first time I told her no? No. To the knowledge I had at that time, I parented her. As I gained more knowledge and I gained more trust, I changed the way I parented. And I think that's what you have to do in government. In 1994, that was the way that was considered a bright idea. Now in 2020, a lot of our ideas, I don't use a pager anymore. Okay. A walkie-talkie and all that stuff. To get a pager, I remember getting a pager like, wow, Motorola. I mean, to have a pager still, that was ridiculous. You need to move with the time. You need to understand the time. You need to go back and reflect on the history, but you don't necessarily have to continue that. And I appreciate what Vice President Biden has been able to do to say, yes, I saw that, and he has apologized for different situations. But you have seen where the president has not apologized for that situation. And he wasn't in government. It's easy for people who were in government to sit there and criticize everything else. But there may be a reason why you made a decision in 2006 or 2016 that you're not going to make in 2020. And sometimes, and hopefully we don't want to say we always learn from that, but sometimes it takes a loss for us to understand a win. And it's taken the Democratic Party, the 2016 loss, to understand how to win 2020. Now, a lot of people have PTSD. They're scared about the polls. I'm not scared about the polls. I think the polls are accurate. And I think they were accurate in 2020, okay? Just some small little towns and little cities that you forgot about and we lost. If we don't take for granted local politics, we shall win this one. And I think that's what the key is. But that longevity has its place, like Dr. King said. And longevity makes us to have to compare and contrast, and we're not going to always have the same idea. And that doesn't mean that we were wrong when we were younger or we were right when we were older. They're different times.
I just wanted to add, when it comes to the crime bill, that's something that Biden has apologized for. He's worked with President Obama to get, I think it was about 1,000 of people who had been convicted under that crime bill out of prison. He has definitely tried to pay penance towards that mistake that was made. I believe he's had, 47 years in public office. What really irks me is when people act as if people cannot grow, as if politicians cannot grow and we cannot evolve. When that crime bill was passed, as Mike said, you had pastors that supported it. You had the Black Caucus that supported it. Bernie Sanders voted for it. Like, this was like in its totality, everybody was in agreement that this was the right thing to do. People who were of color and white people, everybody was on board. Of course, as we move forward, as Dr. Davis stated, as life evolves, as things change, as times show us through experience, we then are able to make different decisions and look and see things through a different lens. So I think at this point, Joe Biden has done as much as he can do to atone for that mistake. But when I look at Trump, he does not seek redemption in anything that he does, whether it be in Charlottesville, whether it be telling the Proud Boys to stand by, or whatever it is. He stands in all of his brazen glory, and he never backs down. He never says he's sorry. He never says anything. So when I'm looking to make my decision, I'm looking for a commander-in-chief that can take accountability. I'm looking for a commander-in-chief that can pivot. I'm looking for a commander-in-chief that can say, hey, I did not understand at that time when I said this or when I did this, what those actions in their totality would mean for certain specific communities. Now that I see that that is an issue, this is what we're going to do moving forward. And I think for me, as I casted my vote, that was the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And, to your point, Ms. Bryant, the Safe Justice Act was something that Biden had worked with President Obama to implement.
Right.
And so when we're looking at the records, I think about the comment made by Congressman Clyburn, where he said, look, I'm not comparing Biden to the almighty. I'm comparing him to the alternative. And when you do that, do we really have much of a question? I mean, and, when you're just looking at the records, I know folks would say, well, look, the First Step Act didn't even get onto the books until the House changed Democratic in 2018. So if that had gone the other way, would we have the First Step Act? Was that even on his agenda as a candidate in 2016? Now you have all of these different interest groups who are making sure that Biden is implementing their policies, and he's receptive to each of them. Any other thoughts before we just conclude for the evening?
Well, I'll finish with this. And one, again, Mike, I think I speak for all the panelists. I am so proud of you, young man. This is exciting to see. It is so rare. You are obviously, as those books show, well learned, but you seem to be inquisitive and understanding that you, as all of us probably do, have to go to wells of wisdom to get better water. So I am proud of you, young king. Wherever you going, take me with you. I would love to be there. I don't know where it is, as long as it's got a good golf course and some good food. But I am proud of you, young man. I said anybody who's watching, I say this always to my students. This nation has always been revolutionized by a generation that was 2 generations behind the leadership, the youngest generation. Whether that was the women's movement, whether that was Vietnam, whether it was anti-war. Early on, it was a young generation that started a nation in 1776. 100 years later, it was a revolutionary generation that started a dissension that caused what we knew to be the Civil War. We have always been led by progressive ideas and ideology. It has been framed in different faces, but the Civil Rights Movement started with a 24-year-old Dr. King and a 21-year-old John Lewis, who rode on a freedom bus with nobody who was over the age of 23. We have to understand that the people who have gone before us have experienced the Dr. Davises who are aware of how to get things done. But if we do not empower younger voices to have influence, the nation slows down. And what you are looking at in this nation's history, is I don't want to start teaching because my students will probably roll their eyes, is a sluggish return on investment. That there are not enough younger voices. And I don't just mean that by age, but I mean that by perspective, a diverse, female-oriented, African-American and minority-oriented view of the nation's policies that are not having enough return on their investment. So if you are watching this, you don't have to run for office to be influential. You can hold a podcast or have individuals on, but you do have to empower those who are in a place or a space to have different views on the policies of this nation. Or as we are seeing, we will start to regress our Supreme Court. We will start to regress our EPA laws. We will start to regress so many things that it will have an effect of generations. And at this point in time, unless we speed up the process next Tuesday to get back on track of progress, we will get to a halt. And at that point, your nation is regressing. So I am proud of you, my brother. I hope many people pour into you that they are proud of you as well. And Mr. Dr. Davis, I will be sending my donation for poll workers on Tuesday for you. I'm late on this, but I thank God for you. I was blessed to have seen your face. I will tell my man, Mr. Grant, to give you a shout out as well. He ran for county commissioner there in Carolina. And it is always a blessing to see a young queen who has the intelligent awareness. I wish I could put you on the same screen as this other African-American female who runs around saying that she knows a Black voice. I ain't gonna say her name, Miss Candace. I just thank you that you were balancing the mess that some of our sister individuals on the other side are pushing out. And I am blessed by you all. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to go ahead and end by, asking each of you real quick, for someone who's having election anxiety right now, we're 5 days away. People, can have flashbacks to 2016, and the consequences of that night. What are your words of encouragement, if any, do you have for someone who may have voted or may plan to vote, but they're still worried they're still not as hopeful as they would like to be in their government, and whether or not things would work in accordance to progressive values, if they have progressive values or values that they hold dear. Dr. Davis?
I have to go to sleep understanding Romans 8:28, that all things are going to work together for the good to them that love God. My faith has to keep me going. I have been blessed to win elections and I've lost elections. I've given a concession speech and I've accepted a concession speech. I trust in the fact that God says he sets up his kingdoms and he takes them down. And there was a reason for 2016 election. I think that showed America an ugly side that they thought that was over. And it helped us all to realize that no matter who we are, we have to get out and vote. It brought us many things. And so if you're having anxiety, you're not alone. Trust me, I'm a therapist. And I have it too. But at the same time, I have to realize that even if Vice President Biden wins, that doesn't mean that it's over. It's a lot of things that we're going to have to be able to do because the other movement is going to continue. If he loses, it's not over. We have to continue to fight. So whichever way it goes, it's not over. And once you realize that it's not over, we have to play long ball. Long ball means that we're going to be here. You fight until I die. And I will be fighting on some kind of campaign, carry me down and take me when my eyes, I hope my daughter and my grandkids take me down there and I can vote when I'm 90 and 95. We're taking my dad down there and voting. He's not, he's an old Korean War vet. It does not end. The struggle continues. Like Senator Kennedy always says, the struggle continues. And that's what we can't just say, oh, the struggle's over, the fourth and the third. It is going to continue. And I think we have to rest in the fact that our faith is going to have to get there and we move forward. And again, it's been an honor to be with you, Mr. Taylor. I look forward to you finishing up and getting that all your academic preparations. You're awesome. And the other two, Lord have mercy. Sister Bryant, you are great. You understand your numbers. You understand politics. Keep that. That's a talent. That's a gift.
Thank you.
And you better win down there in South Carolina, Mr. McCall. I mean, you bring home that Southern cookie. You're like, I don't know what's in the cooking. The cooking is Victoria's cooking. It's that greens, it's that hot sauce, it's everything else. We're going to win it down there in South Carolina, okay? And so that's where my family started out in South Carolina. Grandma was born in South Carolina, then she headed to North Carolina. So yeah, Grandma's roots and all of us ancestors, we need a South Carolina victory, all right? So, and then we'll take it on here in the North in Indiana. So let's roll. Blessings to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Mr. McCall?
Yeah, well, what I would say is, man, what I think with 2016 woke a lot of us up and let us know that election does have consequences. And you can see, I think, in the momentum out there in the polls that people understand that. And what I always tell people is, regardless if Donald Trump wins or loses, there's going to be another day that comes up, right? And we have to get out there and continue to fight. Regardless of, who wins this thing, man, the fight is still up there, man. And again, Brother Taylor, thank you for having this. Mr. Davis, nice to meet you, man. Hey, finish it up, man. Bring it home. Miss Bryant, you're awesome, man. You're a great mind. Pleasure to be in the presence of you all, man. You all doing great things and continue to do great things. But again, just want to reiterate, man, that the fight is not over regardless of who wins this race. Let's roll up our sleeves and get in this thing. And they say the moral arc of history, I miss this quote up every time. The moral arc of history bends, I don't mess it up, but it bends towards justice. That's what I want to get to. And we got to fight to make sure that we get there. Mr. Davis, he wanted to finish that quote for me. Mr. Davis, finish that quote for me, please. Please finish that quote for me. But again, man, thank you all for having me.
That's why it goes slowly. It bends, but it's something about slowly. It goes slowly.
No, not that one. No, you messed it up. You messed it up too. Not that.
I know. Moral arc. There's Lord have mercy. We'll get it before you get out.
Google it real quick. We got to get the quote right.
I'm telling you, we got to get that right.
Oh,
there you go.
The moral arc is history is long, but it always bends towards justice. Right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yeah,
Thank you. You saved us both. You saved us both. It wins.
Thank you, y'all, man. Thank you for having me, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're going to close out with Ms. Bryant.
Yes, I would just like to say for those who are having anxiety, I think we all have anxiety as a country. I think it is impossible to have a functioning cognitive mind and not have anxiety, given all that we have endured these last 3.5 years. But I would just caution you just to remember that if your vote did not matter, they would not be trying to stop you. We would not see what is happening in the Supreme Court with already in litigation, and the election hasn't even happened yet. We wouldn't have had what took place with Mr. DeJoy being placed as the postmaster, and all of the slowing down of the mail unnecessarily, trying to keep your voice from being heard. So that in and of itself says to those who are feeling anxious or not sure if their vote is going to count, that your vote very much does count. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing anything and everything humanly possible to prohibit you from being heard. So I would just implore you to stand in line, make your plan. If you have absentee ballots, it is too late to mail in your absentee ballot. So you need to make sure that you're taking that ballot down to a certified office and dropping it off. And in some states, you can just swap out the absentee ballot and be able to do the normal in-person ballot. But make sure that you are voting. And that's all that we can do, is to make sure that we do our part. And if the numbers are accurate in the droves that we are voting by the millions, and we haven't even had election day, then we do hope and we do claim that we will be victorious with our candidate coming out. But at this point, that's all that we can do. It's just stay the course and make sure that we are voting. And thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me on, and thank you to all of my additional panelists. It was very nice to meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of this. It's been a privilege and honor to have all of you on this panel, Dr. Davis, Mr. McCall again, Ms. Tasha, Mr. Reginald Hubbard, and Mr. Devin Keith, City Councilman in Huntsville, Alabama. This was an amazing panel, and I thought it was a very insightful, informative panel, a very thoughtful panel. I just want to encourage those who may be watching to not allow your anxiety to make you lose hope in public policy or politics, but just understand that this is a long haul game. I think that was mentioned this evening. No one candidate, once they're in office, is going to just eradicate every problem. You know, COVID-19 will still be here, despite what folks are saying in terms of what's going to happen on November 4th. But what we can do is put people in place to get us on a trajectory of progress. And that's what this Tuesday is going to be about. I just want to thank each of you again. This upcoming Monday, I encourage you to tune in at 7 p.m. This will be my last broadcast of the Political Mic. I want to thank you each for being a part of this these series of conversations. And I want to thank the viewers for your support, for your viewership, and for just making sure that you're staying informed. I just had a wonderful time with this project. I didn't expect it to get this far, but I'm just thankful for each of you and for those who have been a part of this in the past. I'm looking forward to Monday, and I just want to encourage you to I'm just going to reiterate what Ms. Tasha said. If you have a mail-in ballot right now, it's too late to send that in by mail. Go and put that in a mailbox that is certified. Ensure that your ballot gets in. Time is of the essence. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the 18th edition of the Political Mic podcast. Thank you all again for watching, and thank you for being a part of this podcast.